Hi, sorry for the slight technical glitch and little delay. You know how wonderful it is doing these type of things from home. So I am delighted to be back again and sharing more innovations at work conversations. And we need more innovations at work more than ever than we have done in the past, because we're dealing with so much more. We're dealing with the kind of uncertainty and unpredictability and challenges in our workplaces that we have never dealt with in the past before. And what has happened as well within that is that the future of work is here now. I did mention that last time, and it really makes a big difference, because what it means is that technology that we're using has accelerated everything. It is driving us to work in very different ways. It is digitizing a lot of the different processes that we're using in our daily lives. And it means it's less predictable. It means we're working in more networked ways. And that really makes a difference when it comes to how we need to be working closely together. Jen, can you mute? I can just hear feedback. I just needed to hear. Okay, now. So what we're dealing with now is having to work much more closely together. Are you getting an echo? Do you have anything else open? Do you have a a phone that's on with this on? If you had LinkedIn open on your, okay, all right. So that's me. You're getting lots and lots of me right now. Okay. So troubleshooting on the fly. We hear it now. So that's been Jen. You've been hearing me just chatting with Jen, trying to sort out so that we actually don't get this lots of feedback. Anyway, so here we are now in the future of work. We're dealing with now, and we're dealing with lots of uncertainty. And the key thing here is, as we work together much more closely and working together in ways that we haven't done before, we are needing to connect. We're needing to bring our entire selves to work. I'm still hearing a feedback. Jen, do you have any sound on at all? I can hear you. I can hear a feedback on some phone or something that you have somewhere. Okay, never mind. We'll keep going. So I'm delighted to welcome Jen. Jennifer Brown is a diversity inclusion expert, and what we need right now when we're dealing with some very, very difficult situations, whether it is externally out in our world or it is actually internally in our companies, we're needing to be working together in ways, as I've said, that we have never dealt with before. And these are challenging us. We are needing to bring our whole selves to work. And that means we need to be including everybody. We need to be understanding the breadth and diversity of every single person that we have, and all of the talents and the intelligence and the insights that they can bring together. We're actually going to be able to get through this. And there are lots of people who haven't been able to bring their whole selves to work, who haven't felt included. And that's why I have Jennifer Brown here. She is an expert and in this field, and she's been doing this for a very long time. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be bringing her into the conversation, and so that she can share everything that she's been doing. And she's actually written 2 books. The first one is called Inclusion. The second one is How to Be an Inclusive Leader. And for everybody who's out there, I really know that whatever position you're in, if you're leading a company or a division or a department or a team, or just a member of a team, and in that position, we all have our leadership moments, our leadership roles, and we need to make sure that everybody feels welcome. So Jennifer, it's so great to be here with you, catching up with you. Now we've got rid of all the glitches, and welcome. We are good. It sounds great. Yes, and you got a lovely background, a little different from my brick wall. So I just want to jump right in. You've been in this space for 15 years, maybe something like that. And perhaps just give you a tiny background in terms of how you got into this and why it's so important to you. And it's been an evolution. We're at a very, very different moment now, which for me is incredibly exciting. And I can only imagine what it feels like for you.
My full self, not just to the work, but also to life, was the experience of the closet, was this experience of stigma, the overlapping experience of being in that community and being a woman in business in a male-dominated world, and also being a creative. I was an opera singer as well when I first came to New York, and that was something I never wanted anyone in my newly minted business self to know. And so just the examples go on of things that we put a lot of energy towards covering or diminishing or being in the closet about. And it really impacts, as I started to learn and become a consultant in the space, I really learned so much about how all the dimensions, that are not seen and heard and valued in systems, and this is literally the moment we're in right now, but this has always been true. And I think we're in this new era now of truth telling, and thank goodness, because I think a lot of us have been waiting for this for a really long time, trying to lead the way, for me being very out so that I can role model for others, like what that looks like, because, you can achieve when you don't see role models, you believe you can achieve certain things. And so a lot of that is shifting right now, and it's really great to see. It's difficult. I mean, we're learning some really difficult truths, and we're having to reflect on our role or lack thereof in change, and how we've perhaps opted out, and what does opting in really look like beyond sort of performative allyship to real allyship. I think that's what a lot of us are being challenged with right now. But I have it's been interesting.
Can I ask you, so we have to go back at some point to the whole opera singer thing, because I totally forgot about that. I remember when you and I were speaking at Inbound, and that came up, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to speak to her about that, which was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. So to use some words, some phrases there, which I'm not sure that everybody is really totally familiar with, the allyship. If you could just expand a little bit on that and what it means, and what it means for leaders and also people who are being included by leaders.
Yes. So the word ally or the word accomplice is, some people prefer that, but it's literally conjoining your outcomes with others, being in solidarity with others that are having a differential experience in the world, in the workplace, etc. So what we've learned, hopefully this summer, as you've been doing reading and experiencing the Black Lives Movement and even the pandemic before then, that there were many communities that didn't feel seen and heard in the workplace, and were sort of struggling with inequitable policies, practices, procedures, organizations that just weren't awake. And, try as we might as a consulting partner to awaken them, has been a lot of resistance historically. So, but the word ally is essentially, as an LGBTQ woman, I need male allies and I need straight allies for those identities in me that I'm likely to be covering, that I'm likely to experience bias because of. So my allies do a lot to provide air cover, to have difficult conversations, to step in when I'm always the one that steps in, where they're at the table maybe when I'm not, asking questions. Well, why do we do it this way? So allies have somebody's experience in mind that is not their own. And they've studied that. And that's it's an invaluable thing to unleash, but we need to do a lot more of it.
And so does one seek out an ally, or just know who your allies are in the workplace? Obviously, now that a lot of people are working from home, how does one connect with an ally? Or is it just, as I said, is it someone that you sort of recognize that they're the person in that meeting who's going to be supportive of you? And do you actually then is it up to those allies as well to be stepping forward now and really being part of that conversation? Because I know it's really about a lot more people stepping forward and really trying to bring other people into the conversation and being really proactive about this, which is so much about the future of work anyway. So it all seems to come together in a really important way.
Yeah. I mean, we should be witnessing more people stepping forward, right? That would make it easier if people revealed that, hey, I'm an aspiring ally. I'm on this journey. Here's where I am. Here's what I'm learning. And here's where I'm going to utilize what I have to be in solidarity with and to change outcomes for others. So this is my plan. And if we had that, then those people, by the way, would be flooded with lots of folks that would really like their support and to have, sort of a power sharing relationship. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it does come down to like who has had traditional power in organizations, who has dominated, who might be the majority group, as we sometimes say, and who have been the minority groups and identities that, are relatively underrepresented, marginalized, et cetera. So I would like to see more of that, so I know who is on that journey and I can trust or go to. But then I think we have to sit here and say who's showing me that, and what do I hear about certain leaders? What do I see them doing? Right? How do they walk the talk? What do I hear coming out of their mouth? What do I? I think it's a lot of little things, some big gestures, but a lot of small stuff that people do or don't do. Silence speaks volumes too, right?
Right. And that is one of the things that really has come to light and has been very important for me to learn. If as a leader, you want to show up and show that you're an ally, what are the things, the big and small things that you can do to show that you're an ally and you're going to be there? In your book, you mentioned the inclusive leadership continuum. And so, in order to show that you're showing that you're moving along and you're trying to make that move and be active and proactive and stepping out there. What are the things that inclusive people or leaders that want to be more inclusive from wherever they are, wherever they're starting from now, going forward?
Well, we always start with listening. I mean, there's never enough listening that can be done, and making yourself, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, putting yourself in places where you're the only, putting yourself in places where you aren't familiar with the conversation being had or the stories being shared. It's not your lived experience. Reading books that aren't about your culture, watching things, listening to podcasts, just really humbling yourself to the learning journey is a huge piece so that you have the vocabulary, you have some familiar with microaggressions and who's facing them, even if you've never had one, that you know of targeted at you. But then I think the next activity is, what am I going to do with all that knowledge? And that's where I think leaders need to talk about where they are on their journey. They would need to say, all right, here's what I know, but here's all the things I don't know. And opening up the door to say, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to have the answers, and I'm a work in progress. Here's what I hope to do and to be able to provide. Here's what I want to be leaned on for. Here's what I can activate and that I commit to. Here's my vision for myself and what kind of leader I'd like to be. And I really would seek feedback to make sure I'm having the impact that I want to have. So it's also acknowledging that we're not going to get everything at all right. In fact, we're probably going to get more wrong than right as we embark on this journey. And just literally talking about that in a really open way versus hiding it and hoping nobody notices that we aren't perfect at this. That's not a winning strategy, because we all know you're not perfect at it. We all know you're a work in progress. And so it's better to just build trust by being transparent, to say, hey, I'm gonna get things wrong. I want to know, I want to be better, and I'm not going away. Like, this is going to be something that is on my priority list on an ongoing basis. It's not going to be a fad. It's not going to be a checkbox, but I'm here for the long haul.
I'm finding out, I'm just looking here, and it's saying that people cannot hear you.
No. Shoot.
Cannot hear Jen. You can, hang on a sec. You can hear Jen or not? Sorry, I just want to, everybody who's out there, I'm really sorry. We're just trying to check on the audio, because I'm just waiting to hear back, because one person couldn't. Yes, you can. Okay, she can.
Oh, good.
All right.
Good.
So what I was going to say to that, thank you, Jen. That was really, really thoughtful and insightful. I mean, one of the interesting things for me about all of this, obviously, know that I'm a huge thing about empathy. One of the things that really helped me is I've lived in 5 different countries. So I've been not in my comfort zone. I've been completely the other person. in so many different situations. And I think that really, really helped me understand that what I know and what I think is like the way things are is just what I grew up with, and what I, one particular experience, which is certainly not everybody else's. And that has really, really helped me be empathetic and put myself in other people's shoes. So for me, at the real core of diversity and inclusion, and trying to make sure that people feel welcome and heard and safe, and that sense of belonging, it really is all about empathy and just trying to understand. And that has really been uncomfortable in these last couple of few months, in terms of really trying to understand other people's experiences, which I hadn't done enough of here. And that discomfort, when we're all feeling so uncomfortable in so many other ways, I think it feels to me that that's part of why this movement has changed now. The dynamics of it, the sentiment has really changed. Do you feel that something's changed, or in what way do you feel it's changed?
Yeah, I think we maybe thought we were doing enough because we are well-intended people. I always use the example of the older generation was told to not see color. And so sometimes I'll hear leaders in my room say, well, I don't see color, and now you're telling us to see color. And I say, yes, I am telling you that. Because when we say I don't see color, it is experienced as an erasure of a very different lived experience than yours. But what people have to understand is intentions don't move mountains, and we've got to move some mountains right now, right? Intention, just because I believe something is true about myself, has nothing to do with what I manifest in the world necessarily. The hard work ahead of us is to look at our organizations critically and look at ourselves critically. And I don't mean with a capital C. I just mean, reevaluating everything we do as leaders that we might have done through our own lens of comfort and understanding. What needs to happen is that we need to acknowledge that there is a differential experience being had in the exact same workplace, just to pick one frame, acknowledging that others are having a different experience in the same exact environment. And they are having that experience because of bias, because of stereotypes, because of inequities, because of what's happening outside of work that then they have to put away once they come into work, and the effort that takes, for example. So empathy should come from acknowledging that my comfort is only about me. And that it's an acknowledgement that we all are experiencing this same thing from different lenses, and it's saying, I've done my homework. I understand the headwinds that are faced by certain demographics of talent. So you should know what a microaggression is that's commonly heard on the part of your Black friends and loved ones, your Asian friends, your LGBTQ friends. You should know what those things are, and you should say, I'm going to be vigilant about those things. I'm going to be the one, and I'm going to be the squeaky wheel, and I'm not going to tolerate it. And I'm going to take on that moment to take that burden to correct or to investigate, right? That to me is what needs to happen, so that those of us who are impacted by a lot of these things aren't always the only voice for change.
Right. And it has been I think also the knowledge, really seeking out knowledge has been an important part of my personal journey, as I think many people, and some of the things that you're talking about in the book, and really trying to understand it in order to be able to connect with the experiences. Because I think for me, living in other countries, you're surrounded by the experience. And one of the things you do recommend is go and, experience and go and be in, and whether it's traveling or just going to different places where you really are in a very different environment. And I think that expanding people's experience, expanding my own knowledge of the different histories, or the history, history, absolute history doesn't exist. It's just the truth is, as somebody who wrote that particular book or did that particular documentary, saw it, and having the different perspectives and gathering all of that knowledge and being able to sort of synthesize it and realize how different other people's experiences can be from your own. I think it's so fundamental. So when you're going into a company and you're looking at the situation and trying to bring everybody into it and help that leader become move along that continuum and change the dynamics of how they talk to people? Are the particular areas where you focus first because you know that even if there's small differences, they make a big change, or big sort of habits that can shift in order to help a change in the dynamic, a change in the atmosphere and the dialogue?
Yeah, I think our old approaches have done some damage that we've got to undo. I think that we've had a very kind of unilateral discussion, or not a bilateral discussion about this topic. And we really have had a dual dimension where there's multiple dimensions that should have been talked about beyond race and gender, for example. But traditionally, this whole conversation has focused on certain information and getting more diversity of representation along race and gender, basically. And so that has really good and important focus. But when we think about inclusion and people chipping in and getting involved, many people have no idea how to get involved in this. They don't know what they can do. They don't sort of natively understand this from a lived experience perspective. And I'm talking about anyone, say, who identifies as white and male, just to use an example. And so people not understanding what they can do and not being enlisted to do something concrete have sort of opted out and sat back. Or being well-intended, right? There's these other sort of barriers to engagement. There's, somebody else, this is just the compliance thing. Or, it's a flavor of the month and, it's not going to be a priority soon. I just need to wait it out. Or, the people of color in our organization and the women are going to do all the work on this so that I don't have to. So there's a lot of, I think, sort of apathy, not understanding there's a problem. I mean, there's a lot that gets stuck right there. And I do spend my time trying to name that, because I think it's helpful to name things and say, hey, guess what? You may be missing out on leading and managing and being a part of diverse teams, because this is not something you've thought about. You don't know how to do it. You don't have a competency. And the world is changing. You have to have a competency on this. And so I just don't think it served us to leave a whole sort of cohort of people on the side as we've marched forward for progress. We've got to figure out how to include everyone and figure out how to enlist them and equip them with new skills and mindsets so that they can meaningfully participate. Because then if we do that, then we've enlisted, and frankly, a lot of people with power. Like when you're doing all this work without the engagement of people with power, it can take you years to accomplish something that would take somebody with power one moment. And so it's just a completely inefficient way to tackle things, I think. So we'll look back and we'll say, wow, we probably could have done this differently, I think, because, I hope we'll get more sophisticated with this. But I think there's a huge opening right now to enlist and equip people who have not been involved. Now they want to be involved. And so, I want to jump into that and, work with that. Oh, bless you.
Oh, so how do you approach the resistance?
Yes.
Excuse me. I tickle my throat. Because there are always some people who are, whomever they may be, who are sitting there either, or they just think it is, as you said, the flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. It's not, they can sort of pretend now, but it's going to go away. Mm-hmm. How do you, because sometimes in my work, I don't try with them. I sort of say, well, they'll come around in their own time, but your work is different. And it is so important to bring people around for everybody else's sake. In my work, sometimes they won't work as effectively. They won't be able to perform as well, and they won't collaborate as well, which does affect the team, but not necessarily in the same ways that yours is so meaningful and can really have a devastating effect on the people the person or people who are feeling excluded. Mm-hmm. So what, and particularly if you're a leader and you see there's somebody who is resistant on your team and can how do I bring them around? What do you do? What do you say? What's your advice?
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier, which is empathy building. I mean, I think there's, a powerful story that's heartfelt can really hit somebody, right? And it can change things and set people off on a different trajectory. So I never want to I never want to exclude that as a technique, but we really have to hit the business case hard with this, particularly with the audiences that I work with, to say, what kind of leader do you need to be to attract and retain the best talent, which, by the way, is, if you look at the emerging talent, say under the age of 35, they're extremely diverse. And they are very passionate about this topic. And they sort of expect, as table stakes, leaders and organizations to be competent at this and comfortable. And clearly they aren't comfortable, right? They barely know anything about it, let alone have not prioritized it. So there's this like massive, I think, emergency from a mismatch perspective in organizations that I think is a ticking time bomb. From a representation perspective, a retention perspective of talent, and then to ensure we fix the problem, which is that most of our senior leadership teams look nothing like the rest of the workforce and look nothing like the world that any company, name it, is doing business in today. So the business case is, do you care about being as innovative as you can be, retaining the best and brightest talent who are diverse in all ways, visible and invisible? Do you want to do the work to be effective as a colleague, as a leader, as a manager with that workforce? And then do you want to be able to marshal all of that to build better products and services for a diverse world? And I can tell you that homogeneous groups are not going to have the answers for that. They are not going to do this well. They're not. Yeah. They're going to actually put their foot in it. Yeah. And it is a huge business liability to not be good at this. And so if I have to talk about it that way, I just say to people, you're making a choice. It's your choice. Right. You can choose obsolescence. You can choose irrelevance.
That's why I sort of think, like, if you don't do some of the things that I'm talking about to do with empathy and the rest of it, they will find that they can't hire people. They will find that they can't be the best and the brightest, or they won't keep them. Do you sometimes suggest that people look at their exit surveys, or talk to some of the recruiters about who they're not being able to get, who some of the people that they weren't able to hire? Because I remember I was talking to somebody who deals with diversity and inclusion and empathy at HubSpot, and she said that she's finding that a lot of people, the younger folks who are interviewing, in their interview, they are asking, what is your diversity inclusion policy? And then they're of whomever they are, and they need to know that their values, as you're saying, that they are looking for a much more inclusive environment, whatever background, whatever race, whatever gender that they are. And if they don't see that in the company they're going into, they won't join.
That's right.
And that's very powerful for me to hear that these questions are being asked, and as people are coming into or desiring to find out more about organizations, because that's really what starts to change the dynamic, from top and bottom, and impact the profits. We would hope that it wouldn't have to be that way, but obviously, in some cases it really is.
It's carrot and the stick. We've got to use both as consultants, and I would love to be able to say the carrot will do all the work. But sometimes there's a stick that needs to be involved, like, holding managers and leaders accountable on their performance reviews and for their comp, for their inclusive environment and how that's measured, or the diversity on their teams, and setting goals and introducing accountability is one measure that some companies have done, not everybody. But it has to be done in the right way, but it is very effective. It certainly gets people's attention. You just also have to be careful what gets measured gets done. And sometimes there can be some unintended consequences to this.
Such as what? Just out of interest.
I think we can scramble to get the bodies in the door, right? Yeah. We can count. We can put all of our focus on counting and none of our focus on what the environment actually feels like once you get people in the door, right? So if we only measure representation, what I would be interested to see is what is their longevity at a company? What is their career mobility?
And to that point, in fact, the woman from HubSpot said, they have HEART, and the E used to be effectiveness, and now it's empathy, and they actually do keep taking the temperature to make sure, depending on to see where it is. And I think, do you recommend, in terms of being able to make sure that these habits stay, that the way people are interacting, how do you keep keep that long tail going on after you've come in, you've helped people sort of understand how they can best orient themselves, the kind of mindset that's going to be helpful. How do you, is it a question of including some kind of inclusivity in the survey, a regular survey, or what's the best way to keep that going once people have started to make the effort and change those habits on a more permanent basis?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest criticism is we do the unconscious bias training and then there's no long tail, right? There's no reinforcement, there's no coaching or support available, because behavior change and habit change takes a lot of kind of daily practice. And so we make sure there's a strategy in place, right? Training is one of the mechanisms, but training isn't a strategy. A strategy is goals, metrics, actions, stakeholder analysis. It's a holistic and long-term commitment. Then we work the plan. We work the plan in multiple ways. We look at our policies, our practices. We ferret out where there is bias. We correct it. We shift things. We continue to do training where, more skills and support is needed. I think the daily reminders, we're doing a text reminder now. We have a partner that enables us to do sort of your daily inclusion nudge in the morning. And then it checks back with you in the evening to say, hey, did you do something? Even for 3 minutes. What was it and what was the impact? And so I do think we have to think about how we tap people and make this a sort of hygiene so that it doesn't feel like, oh, I do all this work once, and then I forget about it. And then I do more work and then I forget about it. It's literally like
nudge is a really powerful way. I mean, I know actually the UK government was so affected by the book Nudge and that idea of incremental change that they actually introduced it into how the equivalent of the IRS nudges people to pay their taxes. Because that positive, hey, you be a good person and you pay your taxes actually has really worked. And, putting things in the cafeteria near a thing. So I think, those kind of nudges can be very helpful and mutually reinforcing if you have, you also know and reminded of the difference you're making to everybody's lives and to the general atmosphere. Because, like with empathy, it's like just being empathetic towards someone doesn't necessarily help unless it's actually an overall culture which has that empathy sort of ingrained into it. It's not going to be reinforcing in the same way, and really be able to provide the kind of environment that's going to bring everybody in the same way.
And can I also say, Sophie, the empathy needs to extend like both ways. So we often think, this whole group of people needs to do a bunch of work right now. And, but I think that we have to have grace for each other as we learn. And this is going to be a stumbling process. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be imperfect or worse. And we have to be comfortable showing up imperfectly and messing up. But we've got to have loved ones, colleagues, people who we have trusted relationships with that we've earned, where we will be told when the emperor has no clothes, when we're like struggling to get something right. And we've got others being gracious with us and not calling us out, but calling us in. We talk a lot about, we live in this culture where there's a lot of like public shaming going on and a lot of also like righteous and justified anger. And so that's being given a voice right now. And so the question for aspiring allies and people who are like, whoa, I'm just waking up to this. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the competency. I want to develop it. Ideally, we all kind of move forward together with empathy for each other's journeys, because there's not a single one of us that hasn't had an awakening like the one a lot of us have had this summer. Maybe we had it earlier in our life about what LGBTQ plus means. I'm hetero and I'm cisgender and I have no idea what that is. And I put my foot in it. And so just remember, like, turn the tables and say to yourself, when was somebody empathetic and showed me grace and space? When was that? When did I appreciate that so that I could come back the next day and do something better? We can't lose sight of the fact that we've all been there. And so when we're trying harder to be different, I think we've got to hold space for each other. And I know that's hard because emotions are high right now. And there's a lot of sort of pent up, like, I am angry that I haven't been heard. And that is so invaluable. It's such a gift, but now what?
Yeah, and to your point, diversity inclusion has been gender and race specific for a long time, and or that's where the emphasis has been. And really, there was so much to it, and in this moment where people feel, overwhelmed and challenged and isolated, and we're all very challenged at moments.
Yes, it is.
I have my good days, my bad days. I have my
we all do. We all do. Minute by minute.
The good thing is we're all in it together, and I think that is, as we've talked about, that is for me part of capturing this moment. That this is actually a good moment to be doubling and tripling down to really get through this and understand and connect, because we need to connect so much personally to get through this, and professionally to be able to get through and emerge out the other side. And I think, what has been, I think, very helpful, I see as being very helpful, that people see into each other's homes and see how different we really are. And, that, how different your background is from mine. And, what does that mean about, who you are? And I sort of think about this and I'm like, oh, okay, so what does that mean about, who Jen is? And, these are the things that I have really been given so much more dimensionality to the people that I talk to, the people I have Zoom calls with. And I love that. And I love how much more we're actually understanding just from that about other people. And, and we are all feeling much more raw. We are all trying to support each other in different ways. And that means, really trying to reach across the divide and reach through the screen.
I wish we could.
And, whether it's playing, watching videos together, which is a great app. I love that. And I've played Trivial Pursuit with somebody, with my kids and her kids, and that was fun. I think there are a lot of things that we are doing that are helping us connect in the breadth and depth of who we are, that we in different ways that we have been before. Do you find that?
Oh yes, I really do. I mean, I think that fact awakened the empathy that led to the response to George Floyd's murder. I mean, I really think that the pandemic separated us, yes, technologically and physically, but actually enabled us to learn more about ourselves that we couldn't hide, right? I can't hide what's behind me, or my same-sex partners walking around behind me. And maybe I was closeted to my colleagues, and I can't be anymore. Or maybe my relatives have been impacted by COVID. Maybe I'm caregiving, maybe I'm parenting and really struggling with mental health issues. Like we've had no choice, I think, to share more of our truths with each other, right? I think a lot of us would probably have preferred not to be, have more on display about what we really go through every day. But you talk about important information for us to know. You talk about empathy building to say, I never knew that about you. And then I never understood that this is actually a derailer for you in the best of times and circumstances normally. And it was something you never talked about. And now it's something that's being exacerbated. So anyway, the trust that we've had no choice but to build with each other has been really profound. And I think coming into the summer then, we were like literally ready to be awakened. I mean, I think we'd already been awakened, but that was why we saw so many white protesters in, where like people of color said over and over, I've never seen protests that look like this. Like, what is going on? Like, why now? When all of this has been happening for so long. And so, but now the awakening happened for many of us, but the hard work is ahead. The hard work is going to mean do not let that door close again. Don't go back to what might be comfortable for you.
Right.
Don't go back to opting out and, leaning back on perhaps privilege to say, well, as long as I take care of me, I'm fine. And I'm going to go back to sleep.
And so
this is what we got to do.
I think I mean, for the next few months, we may have, I don't think there's much sleep that's going to be had. as whatever happens, there's a lot that needs to be connected and reconnected and rebuilt and just shifted, because there's so much that hasn't been working, that is, it's so divisive, and so many bridges need to be rebuilt in whatever
True.
situation that we have.
Every situation.
Yeah. And so, as we look ahead, and I'm always, looking towards the next normal. We have an interim moment right now. We have to deal with COVID during the fall and see how that goes. And so we can't find our new normal. There's no going back. I think there are so many problems with where that was. But as we're trying to craft our new normal, what are the things that you feel can try and ensure that people personally can make sure that they're not sort of slipping back into that comfortable wherever it was, and that we're all proactively moving forward? Because I think that's what's so important now that we know that we actually are in a different place, and making sure that people realize that as we move forward, we're in the future of work environment. We need to have all these different elements. We need to be thinking and acting with more empathy. We need to be more inclusive, because otherwise we're just not going to be able to bring everybody along and get the most out of everybody. How are you trying to encourage people with this, knowing the zeitgeist that we have right now, and how people can move forward with the most positive view and energy possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, a lot of us are probably overwhelmed and paralyzed with the amount of learning and things that we've been shown this year. So I do want to say the self-care piece is important for all of us, whether we're out there protesting, whether we're using our voice in a new way or in the way we always have, but being engaged in a different way, or whether you're sort of waking up and saying, oh my goodness, I'm so horrified by what I'm learning and my own role or lack thereof in it, right? So we all have, I think, to acknowledge there's a level where the gas tank is full and we can't pour any more gas in. It's gonna spill everywhere. You have a capacity, right? The important thing, I think, is to learn in a sustainable way. And we want you healthy. We want you, nobody can really learn and be productive from a place of deep shame. And so in the work I do for myself is just noticing when I go to that really shameful place, around all the things I just mentioned, and to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, but I'm not going to get stuck here, but I am going to take the important lessons from this feeling. I'm going to feel it. I'm not going to deny it, but I am going to move through, and it's going to happen again. And I know it's going to happen again, but that resiliency, that failing forward, that really it is resiliency, honestly, we're talking about, right? It's the long-term role and change that we can play takes pacing and grace for self and self-care, and sort of stepping in or stepping out with your capacity when you have bandwidth, understanding where your voice is most needed. It's not about always on 24/7 in a panic, always triggered, all in social media does this to us. It sort of hijacks us constantly. So I think you got to know yourself, and you have to think about, this is a long-term journey I'm on. Right. And it's going to make me so much richer of a person and so much more capable of showing empathy, of feeling empathy, of understanding people's struggles, and of contributing to changing that. It's a delightful, amazing privilege to be where we are right now. Yep. But we must be careful. Do not squander what we have been shown this summer. Goodness. I mean, I cannot countenance that. So that's not an acceptable answer.
Yes, and it's a beautiful way to put it. It's also a very interesting challenge. It's a sensitive balance between creating those boundaries, because creating those boundaries of self-care, of not working all the time, when so many people are working from home, and boundaries are really hard to create, but are necessary to be able to protect ourselves from not working too many hours, and being able to have that sort of sense of self to protect and care for, but also therefore not creating boundaries that don't let people in, that we can still be including. So it is that interesting balance that we're really trying to connect and share and do it in the right way. Jen, this has been such an amazing conversation, and but I know that there are a number of things that I haven't even touched upon that I know are very, very important to you. So tell me, a couple of things that I haven't got to that you think are really critical in this whole the movement that's going on right now, the movement you have been a huge part of and a rising part of, that you're working so hard on. What haven't I asked you that's really important?
Yeah, a couple of themes that always come up. One is beware of performative allyship. So we talked about allyship as standing up and alongside in solidarity and sharing privilege, resources, access, capital with others, so that we can start to rebalance opportunity. And so beware of performative allyship, meaning that this is not a check the box. It's not a one and done. And don't be afraid of it because it's not a one and done. It's, like I said, it's this tremendous privilege to be on a journey of learning about humanity, of learning about how something's experienced by someone else, and then of learning the fact that you actually have some levers you can pull to impact that is actually incredible. And that leads to my second point, which is acknowledging and sort of investigating our privilege. And I don't just mean white male privilege. I mean that we can be simultaneously in need of others' allyship. So I'm a LGBTQ plus woman. So I need male allies in my life, and they're incredibly important. And I need straight allies in my life who are standing up for LGBTQ equality. But on the same time, I am also an aspiring ally using other parts of my identity that I'm probably underutilizing, that I can marshal in service of that allyship, meaning opening doors, sharing my platform, highlighting voices, removing myself from the conversation or the center and centering others. Literally like thinking about what do I have access to that I'm not doing anything with that could change the headwinds that are being experienced by somebody who doesn't look like me or share my various identities. So I think that privilege is not a bad word. It is, to me, these are things we have. We probably were given them. Sometimes we earn them, but I might argue it's sort of an accident of birth. And to me, I feel very purposeful when I think about my background in that way, because now I feel like I know what I need to do. And now the question is, who needs that solidarity? What can I do that I possess, that I have access to? And I think that's a very actionable, conversation to have with yourself, and it makes a huge difference.
That's a super point. I think that everybody can really decide, today, tomorrow, this week, next month, what is it that I can do that can help somebody? What is it that I have that I can do that can help somebody else that doesn't have the same kind of advantage and privileges that I do in this particular area? And all of us have something somewhere that can be helping in whatever particular dimension that may be that you can help with. And I think those can be small and big, and that's a very, very powerful idea and a wonderful thing to be sort of sowing the seed of, because I think that anybody can do it, no matter what position you're in, whatever role that you have, whatever it is that you want to do, you can make that choice and choose different things to do on whatever you opt for on a particular day.
Exactly.
What else? Sorry. Yeah, go on.
What else? So we talked about performative allyship. We talked about privilege. We talked about understand where you are. If you read my second book, which is How to Be an Inclusive Leader, you'll understand there's like where you are in the journey. There's 4 stages that I map out. And I think it's important I wouldn't tell you to jump into the deep end, because, when you're not a good swimmer, or I'm like, you're going to run a marathon tomorrow and you haven't trained for 6 months, you're going to hurt yourself. And so respecting the practice of this work, respecting the muscle that needs to be built, and doing that work day by day, strengthening the muscle so that when you do kind of take it on the road, when you do become more public about using your voice, that you are actually having the impact that you want. I think, this is why I try to say, like, you warm your engine up first, like develop some competency, like do your reading, do your homework, do the things that you have sort of in your sphere of control. And then as you broaden your impact, you're going to become more public. The stakes are going to be higher. And I say this to executive leaders all the time, the bigger you get, the more risk you're taking. And you may get things wrong, and you probably will. And I say, be comfortable being uncomfortable at least once a day. Challenge yourself, work your edge, push that growth zone. And if you feel afraid, you're probably onto something. And I know that's not what people want to hear.
I know that's such a good point. Yes, if you're afraid, it means that you're going somewhere new, and that that is probably a good idea right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think so. Challenge yourself every day. Push your comfort zone. Seek uncomfortable situations. Put yourself in a position where you are the only. Put yourself in a position where you're listening to a conversation, for example, where you're missing all the cultural jokes and cues, right? Like, this is why I watch a lot of media that's not made by people that look like me. And it's not about people that look like me, right? I'm constantly trying to peer into other worlds and experiences and say, oh, I need to really learn. I didn't know that word. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't,
or why that person reacted as they did.
Yeah.
I don't really understand. That would not have been my reaction at all.
Exactly. So this is the richness of life. And I think, though, watch out for the comfort we seek, though, when we say, I just want to retreat into what I know and what's familiar, and I get it. And that's human. So I think that you were talking about the balance of like challenge and step back, right? But every time you push a little further, and then you'll feel the muscle will start to get like not as sore as maybe it was at the beginning, and you'll start to be able to actually use it intentionally. Like what you really want to do is you want to wield your allyship. And you want to know how to land certain things. Like you want to know how to use your voice. But that's a product of a lot of experimentation, a lot of feedback, a lot of adjustment, a lot of experimentation to know exactly what does this situation need? What does this person need? How do I show up as a leader? Right? How do I use my voice and when? What is appreciated by others? What isn't? I think that's
and as you were saying, the grace from the other side, the empathy from the other side, that they see that you're trying and that you're going to make mistakes. And, you are doing your best because, nobody's going to be perfect. And it feels sometimes like there are some landmines and sometimes they're going to blow up. They
are. and I think naming it and saying, I'm probably not going to get this right. I'm probably, I am, here's what I know. Here's all that I don't know. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what you'll hear me say. Here's what I'm endeavoring to do. And I'm a work in progress, and sort of being very transparent about that is something I wish I saw more leaders do, because that extends the space for yourself. When you do that, I like when I walk on stage, I say, I'm probably not the diversity speaker you expected. Like literally, I say that within the first 5 minutes, because I want to beat people to the punch. I want to name what they're thinking, and I want to say, there are things about me you don't know as I step on this stage that I do know about diversity, and then I launch into my LGBTQ identity, for example, one. And so you have to think about like, hey, people are going to look at me and they're going to think all these things. Like we got to know that. But then knowing that, maybe we even name it ourselves. Maybe we say, I might look like this. These things are true about me. These things aren't true about me. These things might surprise you about me. Here's where I'm, you know what I mean? Like being more, I wish leaders would be, they're so busy being like perfect and unassailable and in control.
I do feel that there is a certain, and particularly now it's a little bit easier perhaps because it's hard to be perfect these days. And it's so easy to do the wrong thing because we're just not quite sure. We've never dealt with the situation before. So it's easier to make some mistakes. I also think even, before COVID, there was definitely a move to two important things. One is that success wasn't defined by having the biggest this, the biggest that. It was more experiential. There was more breadth to the definition of success, which allowed also leaders to be leading in a different way. And there is this move now, which has been going on to not be the command and control, to be more of an oversight type leader rather than I'm directing and controlling everything. And I think that does give more ability for leaders to be leading in a different way, to not have to be so perfect, and to be not head and shoulders above the team, but be part of the team and leading from within the team. And I think that does give more capacity to leaders to be more inclusive, because they're at more of a peer level, whether they want to be or not.
I know, right?
Before.
I mean, could I add, Sophie? I'm even promoting reverse mentoring. So really flipping the script of hierarchy. Like literally the least amount of knowledge about how the workforce is changing demographically lives at the top. The least amount of knowledge. So you've got leaders who are the most clueless. So how do we flip that to put people in relationship and have that millennial mentor, literally, and the executive mentee? I mean, that's what I'd like to see. If we're really going to acknowledge what we don't know, like how can that work?
I talk about inclusion across all generations, because I think that the only way that we're really going to get out of all of this mess successfully is, and I do that future of work mess as well as everything else. That
it's all a mess.
but because the tech savvy, but the lack of experience at these sort of, with Gen Zs needs to be combined with some experience, and together, really integrating and brainstorming. I mean, there have been such incredible new advances that have happened over the last 6 months when we've been put into, situations. And that has come from, across genders, across generations, across, from everybody. We've had some incredible innovation. And so that I find exciting and part of what can be very powerful about this sort of moment of disruption and how it's helping us make progress.
We probably wouldn't have changed if we hadn't been forced to, and I think I'm just very grateful that this year happened in the way it did, even though it destroyed so much. It is also a burn to the ground rebuild opportunity. And before this year, we spent a lot of our energy just convincing. It's like you have your head in the sand. You don't want to see this. Because it makes you feel uncomfortable about who you are and it makes you feel bad. I'm like, okay, that's all about you, number one. But this year it's become like undeniable, and it's helped us. It's been the wind at our backs to really create change now, because the cards are in the air and we don't know what this is going to look like. So we have an opportunity to craft this with new voices at the table, which is one of the most exciting things about this is not the old way at all, but let's get new insights around and being listened to and heard and seen and feeling even virtually, right? Feeling included in every way. Yeah. It's awesome. It's in that way, it's been an incredible year, truly.
And on that really positive note,
I don't know how you did that, but that was good.
I really do believe that there is, just as you do, it seems, that there is so much positive in terms of what we can create out of where we are, because everything is thrown up in the air and we never thought we'd have this moment. And yes, there have been some terrible tragedies and awful things that have happened, but there also is the ability and the capacity to be working together and understanding each other in such different ways. So Jennifer, thank you so much for the time that you have shared with us and all the incredible insights that you have given us, the ideas, the tips, the challenges, what we need to be thinking about, all of that. I really, really appreciate it. It's been very, very helpful for me, and I hope everybody who's listening. And this will be available on YouTube later on as a video, so people can go through and watch it again and get the tips there. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sophie. I appreciate it.